What would it feel like to become the first leader of a country? A country that's brand new, with a brand new government, the like of which hasn't been seen before. Welcome to the Creating America podcast, where we are reading through some of the documents and speeches that shaped the United States. I'm Will Saris. I'm an actor and media professional, and I've always loved the study of history. At one point, I realized I often know about various speeches and documents that shaped the history of the United States, but I haven't actually read them. Maybe you're in the same position. Well, I'm a voice actor, so here I hope I can not only read you the text, but make it come alive. Many of these documents and speeches are well known, others you've probably never heard of. Some are inspirational, others will probably shock you. As I've stated before, I'm interested in and have studied history over my lifetime, but I'm not a historian. I won't comment too much on these texts, other than to provide a little context. And I'll try to point you to good historians who can help you out if you want to delve deeper. Additionally, the country has always benefited from a diversity of opinions, and that should be reflected here, so I'll try to bring you texts from many different sources when I can. We're proceeding somewhat chronologically through American history, but I'm sure I'll miss a document or speech you want to hear. If so, contact me. You can email creatingamericapod@gmail.com, and you can interact with me on social media. On Threads, Instagram, and Facebook, we are Creating America Pod, and you can also contact me directly in many apps. My handle is William Saris, one word, and you can subscribe on Patreon at patreon.com/William Saris. It's my hope that as you listen to these documents and speeches, you will gain an appreciation of what our country was, what it is, and what it hopes to be. We just finished reading through the Constitution and some of the Federalist Papers and anti-Federalist writings in the last couple of episodes. So today I thought we'd go through a couple speeches given by our first president. The first one is the brief speech Washington gave to Congress when he resigned his commission as Commander-in-Chief of the Army in 1783. Washington was at that point at the height of his popularity. His men in particular loved him. And if you study history, you'll find that men who command an army are often the ones who become the next king or leader. Think of Napoleon or Caesar. This certainly could have happened after the American Revolution, and Washington had every reason to think it would be a good idea. His men hadn't been paid, and Congress seemed ineffective at leading the country. But Washington, whether because he was coldly calculating that resignation would make him more popular, or was genuinely disinterested in amassing power, likely a combination of both, decided to resign his commission. In doing so, he reminded many of Cincinnatus, a Roman military leader who was given complete power as dictator over the Roman Republic and their military in 458 BC to help solve a crisis. He left 16 days after defeating his enemies to tend to his farm, cementing him as a model of selfless leadership, civic virtue, and service to the greater good. On hearing of Washington's resignation from the army, King George III was reported to have said he thought him the greatest character of the age. John Trumbull, one of Washington's aides-de-camp and a now famous artist, said, "It excites the astonishment and admiration of this part of the world. 'Tis a conduct so novel, so inconceivable to people, who, far from giving up powers they possess, are willing to convulse the empire to acquire more." As historian Thomas Fleming said, "This is the most important moment in American history. The man who could have dispersed a feckless Congress and obtained for himself and his officers riches worthy of their courage was renouncing absolute power to become a private citizen. He was putting himself at the mercy of politicians over whom he had no control and in whom he had little confidence." This was not the last time Washington would do something like this, but that's for a later episode. Washington's address to Congress resigning his commission, 23rd of December, 1783. Mr. President, the great events on which my resignation depended having at length taken place, I have now the honor of offering my sincere congratulations to Congress and of presenting myself before them to surrender into their hands the trust committed to me, and to claim the indulgence of retiring from the service of my country. Happy in the confirmation of our independence and sovereignty, and pleased with the opportunity afforded the United States of becoming a respectable nation, I resign with satisfaction the appointment I accepted with diffidence. A diffidence in my abilities to accomplish so arduous a task, which, however, was superseded by a confidence in the rectitude of our cause, the support of the supreme power of the Union, and the patronage of Heaven. The successful termination of the war has verified the most sanguine expectations, and my gratitude for the interposition of Providence and the assistance which I have received from my countrymen increases with every review of the momentous contest. While I repeat my obligations to the army in general, I should do injustice to my own feelings not to acknowledge in this place the peculiar services and distinguished merits of the gentlemen who have been attached to my person during the war. It was impossible the choice of confidential officers to compose my family should have become more fortunate. While I repeat my obligations to the army in general, I should do injustice to my own feelings not to acknowledge in this place the peculiar services and distinguished merits of the gentlemen who have been attached to my person during the war. It was impossible the choice of confidential officers to compose my family should have been more fortunate. Permit me, sir, to recommend in particular those who have continued in service to the present moment as worthy of the favorable notice and patronage of Congress. I consider it an indispensable duty to close this last solemn act of my official life by commending the interests of our dearest country to the protection of Almighty God, and those who have the superintendence of them to His holy keeping. Having now finished the work assigned me, I retire from the great theater of action, and bidding an affectionate farewell to this august body under whose orders I have so long acted, I here offer my commission, and take my leave of all the employments of public life. Now we turn to April of 1789. The people of the United States, under their newly adopted Constitution, had elected George Washington as the first president. He traveled to New York City, at that time the capital, to assume the leadership of this new nation. After taking the oath of office, he stepped out to the assembled crowd and delivered the following speech. In it you can hear how moved and humbled he is by the people's choice to elect him as the president. April 30th, 1789. Fellow citizens of the Senate and the House of Representatives, among the vicissitudes incident to life, no event could have filled me with greater anxieties than that of which the notification was transmitted by your order and received on the 14th day of the present month. On the one hand, I was summoned by my country, whose voice I can never hear but with veneration and love, from a retreat which I had chosen with the fondest predilection, and in my flattering hopes, with an immutable decision as the asylum of my declining years, a retreat which was rendered every day more necessary, as well as more dear to me, by the addition of habit to inclination, and of frequent interruptions in my health to the gradual waste committed on it by time. On the other hand, the magnitude and difficulty of the trust to which the voice of my country called me, being sufficient to awaken in the wisest and most experienced of her citizens a distrustful scrutiny into his qualifications, could not but overwhelm with despondence one who, inheriting inferior endowments from nature and unpracticed in the duties of civil administration, ought to be peculiarly conscious of his own deficiencies. In this conflict of emotions, all I dare aver is that it has been my faithful study to collect my duty from a just appreciation of every circumstance by which it might be effected. All I dare hope is that if in executing this task I have been too much swayed by a grateful remembrance of former instances, or by an affectionate sensibility to this transcendent proof of the confidence of my fellow citizens, and have thence too little consulted my incapacity as well as disinclination for the weighty and untried cares before me, my error will be palliated by the motives which misled me, and its consequences be judged by my country with some share of the partiality in which they originated. Such being the impressions under which I have, in obedience to the public summons, repaired to the present station, it would be peculiarly improper to omit in this first official act my fervent supplications to that Almighty Being who rules over the universe, who presides in the councils of nations, and whose providential aids can supply every human defect, that His benediction may consecrate to the liberties and happiness of the people of the United States a government instituted by themselves for these essential purposes, and may enable every instrument employed in its administration to execute with success the functions allotted to His charge. In tendering this homage to the great author of every public and private good, I assure myself that it expresses your sentiments not less than my own, nor those of my fellow citizens at large less than either. No people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which conducts the affairs of men more than the people of the United States. Every step by which they have advanced to the character of an independent nation seems to have been distinguished by some token of providential agency. And in the important revolution just accomplished in the system of their united government, the tranquil deliberations and voluntary consent of so many distinct communities from which the event has resulted cannot be compared with the means by which most governments have been established, without some return of pious gratitude along with an humble anticipation of the future blessings which the past seemed to presage. These reflections arising out of the present crisis have forced themselves too strongly on my mind to be suppressed. You will join with me, I trust, in thinking that there are none under the influence of which the proceedings of a new and free government can more auspiciously commence. By the article establishing the executive department, it is made the duty of the President to recommend to your consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. The circumstances under which I now meet you will acquit me from entering into that subject farther than to refer to the great constitutional charter under which you are assembled, and which, in defining your powers, designates the objects to which your attention is to be given. It will be more consistent with those circumstances, and far more congenial with the feelings which actuate me, to substitute, in place of a recommendation of particular measures, the tribute that is due to the talents, the rectitude, and the patriotism which adorn the characters selected to devise and adopt them. In these honorable qualifications, I behold the surest pledges, that as on one side no local prejudices or attachments, no separate views nor party animosities, will misdirect the comprehensive and equal eye which ought to watch over this great assemblage of communities and interests, so, on another, that the foundations of our national policy will be laid in the pure and immutable principles of private morality, and the preeminence of a free government be exemplified by all the attributes which can win the affections of its citizens and command the respect of the world. I dwell on this prospect with every satisfaction which an ardent love for my country can inspire, since there is no truth more thoroughly established than that there exists in the economy and course of nature an indissoluble union between virtue and happiness, between duty and advantage, between the genuine maxims of an honest and magnanimous policy and the solid rewards of public prosperity and felicity. Since we ought to be no less persuaded that the propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right, which heaven itself has ordained. And since the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty and the destiny of the Republican model of government are justly considered as deeply, perhaps as finely staked, on the experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. Besides the ordinary objects submitted to your care, it will remain with your judgment to decide how far an exercise of the occasional power delegated by the 5th article of the Constitution is rendered expedient at the present juncture by the nature of objections which have been urged against the system, or by the degree of inquietude which has given birth to them. Instead of undertaking particular recommendations on this subject, in which I could be guided by no lights derived from official opportunities, I shall again give way to my entire confidence in your discernment and pursuit of the public good. For I assure myself that whilst you carefully avoid every alteration which might endanger the benefits of an united and effective government, or which ought to await the future lessons of experience, a reverence for the characteristic rights of freemen and a regard for the public harmony will sufficiently influence your deliberations on the question how far the former can be more impregnably fortified or the latter be safely and advantageously promoted. To the preceding observations, I have one to add, which will be most properly addressed in the House of Representatives. It concerns myself, and will therefore be as brief as possible. When I was first honored with a call into the service of my country, then on the eve of an arduous struggle for its liberties, the light in which I contemplated my duty required that I should renounce every pecuniary compensation. From this resolution I have in no instance departed, and being still under the impressions which produced it, I must decline as inapplicable to myself any share in the personal emoluments which may be indispensably included in a permanent provision for the executive department, and must accordingly pray that the pecuniary estimates for the station in which I am placed may, during my continuance in it, be limited to such actual expenditures as the public good may be thought to require. Having thus imparted to you my sentiments, as they have been awakened by the occasion which brings us together, I shall take my present leave, but not without resorting once more to the benign parent of the human race, in humble supplication that since he has been pleased to favor the American people with opportunities for deliberating in perfect tranquility and dispositions for deciding with unparalleled unanimity on a form of government for the security of their union and the advancement of their happiness, so his divine blessing may be equally conspicuous in the enlarged views, the temperate consultations, and the wise measures on which the success of this government must depend. Thanks for listening to this episode of Creating America, where we read the documents and speeches that shaped the United States as we know it today. I'm Will Saris, your host and narrator. This show is written and produced by me. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and rate the show and share it with your friends. I've also started a Patreon, patreon.com/William Saris, where you can support this project, which is something I do on my own time. Anything you can contribute is very appreciated. If you'd like to send in a comment or request that I read a speech or document you think I missed, the email is creatingamericapod@gmail.com. You can find the show on social media by searching Creating America, and you can find me there too. If you want to know more about what I do professionally, visit my website, williamsaris.net. Till next time. Copyright 2026, William Saris, all rights reserved.